So welcome to this quick tutorial on how to do pivot tables in Excel. So we have a typical database here. So this is a database, headers and unique samples here in this row. So this plant here, which is a unique number, has a lot of attachments to it on all kinds of measurements that were done to this one single individual entity, in this case a plant. And here we see all the columns, so that's how a typical database looks like, and that's important if you're going to make pivot tables, that the data structure is correct. So here it is. So what we do now, we can select what kind of part of the table we want to put into a pivot table, and then we go to insert and we insert a pivot table. Now Excel asks us, is the range that we selected here correct, or do we want a different range? So again, we could select it, and then it asks, do you want to put it in a new worksheet, the pivot table, or an existing worksheet? I like to put it in a new worksheet, so let's do that. So now it made a new worksheet with a pivot table in it. I rename the sheet to pivot database, so I know it's connected to the sheet here database, but I also know that there's a pivot table, so those are connected. Then here, this is the modern view of pivot tables, and here you see all the headers of the columns, and you could drag these columns to here and build your table. Only in the older version I had the feeling there was a little bit more flexibility and logic in making the tables, so therefore I move to pivot tables and I go to display classic layout. Okay, so now I went to options, display classic layout, and now you see that it changes into a more old-fashioned style. So how does these pivot tables work? Well, it's quite simple. We just can summarize data with it. So now we could say, okay, I want a certain treatment. So here we have the treatment numbers. I just drag them here, and now you see that all the treatments that we had are summarized here. So it finds in the column all the unique entities. In this case it's just T1 to T8. Then corresponding with these treatments, we have done measurements, for example, for the fresh shoot weight. So we could put in the fresh shoot weight, and now we see the number of plants that were measured for this fresh shoot weight. So we can already see that for treatment 7 and treatment 6, 2 things are missing. So we could go to the table and see what's going on there. So we just make a filter and we go to the treatment 6 and have a look. It was 6 and 7 indeed, and the others were fine. So we just make a filter for treatment 6 and 7, and then indeed we see there's nothing filled in for this plant, and for this plant, and for this plant also totally blank. So probably something happened, and there's some information in the logbook on that. Okay, so then we go back to the pivot table, and what we can do now is we could say we also want something on the fresh roots, and in this case we could add all kinds of columns here. But still we have the count. So okay, how to change that count? Well, this gives some tools on the pivot table, so we can change the field settings here. So this is field settings, and now we can get it to, for example, average, and this one also to field settings, average. What we could also do, so now you see the averages of the treatment. So this is sort of your data analysis without statistics, so to say. So this is the summary table, which you can quickly make, but you can also change it quickly, because I can just, by clicking here, I can just remove something. I can also add the same column So now you see it here, and that can be convenient, for example, if you want to have a nice summary on not only here the average, but also we could go to standard deviation. So now I select the standard deviation, and then here I have the count, so I can also calculate the standard error. So yeah, that's a short introduction. We could go a step further. So what we could do is we could also remove certain measurements from averages. So we could say, okay, I'm interested in the treatments, but these treatments, they also have certain blocks in it. So now I have the treatments and I split them up in blocks. So what I can do now is say, okay, I'm not interested in the first block, so I just remove these, and I'm only interested in the last 3 blocks. So in this case now it gives only the blocks that are here, and then we could make another pivot table, but you could also just average these data to get an average value without a block. So you can make a pivot table of this pivot table.